Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Dom, making part one of probably three of my 1v1 team building guide. This is a team building guide in 1v1 of all generations. I've played 1v1 and just watched 1v1 for way too fucking long to just disappear without, I don't know, trying to help players these days, because 1v1 has looked a bit more competitive than it is now in the past. And I'm always trying to see some good players, good talent, so I decided to make this video. It was originally just going to be a 6-hour chonker, but I decided to drop, I guess, 3 parts of 2 hours-ish length, probably. I don't know when the other ones are coming up or being uploaded, but it shouldn't really matter all that much. Before PL, probably. This video specifically is just me monologuing for a bit about just how I team build. This is not saying this is the objectively best way to team build, but I team build very well, I'd say, in 1v1, and I'm just saying, hey, this is my process, here it is. You don't have to build teams the exact way that I do, but I'm just trying to, you know, get people to be able to build some solid shit. Remember, drop a like and a sub, since there's going to be 2 other parts. If you are interested in this, drop a sub for sure. Also, if there's any questions you have, don't like DM me on Discord or anything, unless it's like you want to get really specific or really private. Just drop a comment here and I will respond to you. If you have any questions about like basic building. There's going to be some more advanced concepts in the next few videos, but basically this is just a video for the, you know, vanilla team building process, you know, all that shit, just some tips and all that, and my process in general. There's going to be some random PL footage and some random shit I whipped up in Photoshop throughout the video. This is like first and foremost a video, but this is also like a podcast type of thing. You don't really have to look at the screen. There's some filler content, but there's also some like outlines I did of, like, you know, archetypes in 1v1 and stuff like that. It's just, if you want to look at the screen, it will be helpful. And I recommend watching this video probably not in one sitting. I go over, like, you know, my process, like the first mon, second mon, third mon, the 4th step, you know, stuff like that. But if you want to take it one step at a time, go ahead. I don't recommend watching this video for 2 hours. If you want to just absorb it in your head, you know, that's fine. If you want to like write a few things down, that's also good, because you know, I feel like there's a lot of small things that make up a good team. Maybe not always. It's extremely apparent immediately what team is good and what's bad. But there's a little like small type of things like synergies and stuff that you want to kind of think about and include in your building. So yeah, let's get started. Also, shoutouts to Gohar for getting some of the footage for this video, and shoutouts to Ape711 for the amazing thumbnail. Appreciate it, man. Okay, so I'm here with Crucify, and we're just gonna talk about the basic overall team building process. So, an interesting thing that people don't really like say or like recommend when people ask, hey, how do I get good at building, is you should know the meta to like a fair extent. Like, you know, grab a sample, grab your friends' teams, you know, hit the ladder, ask people for best of 5s. You should also know why certain mons are good. You should have like a good understanding of, for example, S rank mons, because the second, you know, you don't really know what Dragonite is, and then you start team building in SM, for example, that thing will just destroy you. I feel like it's kind of hard to really know what you're doing if you don't really know why, you know, the top tiers thrive in their metas, right? So that's something I recommend. Just get some meta knowledge. And this doesn't mean, or this does not say, hey, you need to have an insane amount of meta knowledge before you even start team building ever. Which is, like, I'm not saying you have to like read up on the whole metagame you're trying to learn, but I'm saying you should, you know, get some games in before you start.
You should have the basics.
You should have the basics, because this guide is for people who are like okay but trying to get better. This guide isn't for actual noobs who have 0 teams in their builder and have, you know, 2008 in their username.
Ladder goons.
Yeah, I mean, even Laddergoons build their own shit.
We're all there.
Laddergoons is kind of my audience, or like people who are new to tournaments. Those are the type of people who I'm like, they know like certain things about the meta, so yeah. Familiarize with the meta, familiarize with the best mons. Ask if you don't understand, hey, why is Zardek so good in ORAS? Then ask people, hey, why is Zardek so good in ORAS? 1v1 room, 1v1 Discord. I'm pretty sure there's a sample, or there's like a simple question, simple answers that like literally no one uses. Use that shit if you need to. Who cares, man?
Yeah. Literally.
Or you can just ask in the meta thread. There's a bunch of different options for why.
1v1 Discord too.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to, get a little bit of knowledge, like a baseline of knowledge in, and yeah, I think that is something you should have. So I highly, highly, highly recommend, quote unquote, maining a gen. If you're like just wanting to get into 1v1 and start building and all that, SS is a good place to start. There's hella tournaments for it, like a lot of the time. Maybe not always, but it's a great place to start. There's like 3 fucking slots in PL, so there you go. And then, if maybe SS is not your thing, or you're an SS player that wants to start, building other tiers, because someone who can build multiple gen tiers is very valuable. I highly recommend starting to like laser focus in on a specific other tier. Learn this other tier really well, so that you can kind of see how this meta and that meta are similar and different. So yeah, I highly recommend laser focusing on a gen, whether that's SS or old gens. If you're learning an old gen, that's great, because all those tiers have absolute penis player bases, except SM. SM has a good player base, but like ORAS, Black, White, DVP all have absolutely 0 players, and it's like an actual struggle to fill them up each tournament. But yeah, just know that if everyone knows that you're grinding a tier, you want to learn it super hard, you probably will get recognized. You will get bought, as long as you're playing those best of 5s, to really like see how you actually like perform the tier when tournaments come. Make yourself like known as, hey, this person is like learning this old gen, or this person is like trying to get to the top of SS. Focus on the gen first, and then once you have multiple gens under your belt, then maybe you can start randomly building Black and White, or randomly building, I don't know, SM or whatever the fuck. I mean, I still think you need hella SM knowledge to build SM, but that's that. So this guide is for all gens. Like, this isn't really lasered focused in on a gen. I have a lot of ORAS examples in this guide, because not only is ORAS the tier that I'm best at, but I'm also very familiar with it. I know how to explain it clearly, and it's also just a simple ass tier. SS or SM are kind of like weird tiers, so you kind of have to like really know super well.
SM, and, there's a lot going on in SM.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in SM. SS is kind of like what happens when you just kind of continually change the tier over and over and over and over, whether it be DLC or bans that people decided should be implemented, stuff like that. But yeah, ORAS is my main example. Another like baseline suggestion that doesn't really involve opening a team builder is watching tournament games of these tiers. Go to the latest gen, yeah, the latest tier, or the latest tournament of the tier you're trying to look for. If it's SS, you can probably find SS replays in abundance, like everywhere, in the 1v1 forum, in like the weird circuit tournaments forum that maybe people use. I think I'm gonna link that stupid forum that like makes no sense, like unofficial circuits or whatever.
Official circuits, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna link that in the description. Sure. It might be in the title card thingy. I don't really know. I've never used those, or it might be in the description. Hopefully both, but I don't fucking know, dude. Watch the tier.
On replays, like for me, I watch like every replay that I can find for like basically every tier, 1v1. So like this has so many benefits for you. You like don't even understand, right? One, you see like what people are using, obviously, so it gives you a baseline of like what is standard, what's good, right? And also like it keeps you like up with the metagame,
Yeah.
right? So you don't get caught off by a new set. Like if you're playing a game, you get caught out by a set that you haven't seen before, but it's been used before. It's like that's something that's preventable. So I just really recommend that.
Yeah, and
That goes along with the previous point of like having metagame knowledge and being up to date.
it's honestly probably more useful than laddering. I mean, the 1v1 ladder has kind of gone downhill. You know, like at some points you used to be able to find good player after good player, and then it kind of dispersed a little bit. But now I feel like there's like no real. I mean, I don't know. Maybe like some tournament players ladder just to keep their
I would say
bases.
Most of the top SS players don't ladder commonly. You see some people do it occasionally, like Dennis and Potato, but it's rare.
Yeah, it's not really that common. Watching and keeping up with what people do is key because say there's a top mon in a certain tier, maybe Kieran Black, Dragon Knight Zard, and you want to know, hey, what does this thing like feasibly run? Because people could make up theoretical Dragon Knight and Zard sets all fucking day, but if you're actually wondering like what do people actually run, then you could maybe find, hey, there's actually like a good amount of Break Zardex and ORSDs, for example. That's actually, it used to not be that common at all, but then it kind of started becoming a little bit more common because people realized, hey, beating Heatran and T-Tar is fantastic, and a lot of teams use those as their only counters, so you're basically getting a 3-0 with just a top tier mon, and then people should see something like that and be like, hey, if I'm running a Heatran on my team, I want a backup Zard X counter, or at least something, at the very least something to actually scare it out a little bit more, maybe like a Venusaur, because that would scare out, Break Zard X, something like, I don't know, just like some random like Scarf Porygon Z or something, stuff like that. So yeah, know what this like people actually run, because if you have no idea what people run, then you're kind of like building in a weird vacuum where if you're not watching replays, not laddering, you have this weird perception of the meta that is definitely not, it's not what the meta actually is. Your perception is going to be completely different because there's already enough things where people don't reveal their text, but now you are completely blindsided to like what people are currently using. So yeah, don't be behind. Don't be behind in the meta. You could be thinking about what people used 6 months ago, but you should be thinking about what people use now. But yeah, you have anything to add to that?
A lot of these points are like interconnected too, honestly. I think that being ahead of the meta is basically just like having metagame knowledge. Once you gain a lot of metagame knowledge, you're able to push boundaries, right? You can predict what's going to be good by predicting what's good into stuff that's common right now. The obvious example is in SS. Of DFS teams were absolutely spam World Cup, and now a lot of top players say DFS is bad because you just get fished by things that beat it, right?
I disagree.
Trends like that. Dom disagrees, yeah. But just simple trends like that are things that you want to try to be ahead of. Potato Champ, for example, won LT pretty easily because he started getting ahead of those trends.
Yeah, it's hard to win a tournament if you're not ahead of the meta, because even being up with the meta is not even enough, in my opinion. I am someone who kind of likes to think about what people aren't using more so than what people are using. If you're realizing, hey, people have stopped using this counter to this set of this mon, then maybe think about, hey, bring this shit back. Certain sets from the past can definitely come back and prove themselves to be really good.
It reminds me of like Sylveon sets throughout the history of SS. Well, like he's between running Custap Berry and Yawn. As an example of that.
Yeah. Also, Sub-Zard X is an example of this. In main gen, it was super duper common. But now, or like for a bit, not now it's common as fuck, but for a bit people were using like Wisp, Counter, Belly Drum, kind of sets or moves that like have, you know, a specific purpose, but aren't super duper useful. Flame charge, I've seen DD charge. People are in Tailwind. But then people like me started realizing, hey dude, this shit has like 12 different practical uses, and the most important one, arguably, is being for other Zard X. Because at the end of the day, a Zard X versus Zard X matchup is probably gonna be more common than a Zard X versus, I don't know, fucking Porygon 2 or Slowbro. You know, I mean, it depends on how people play, but Zard X versus Zard X is actually pretty fucking common in something like ORAS.
It is,
for example.
yeah.
So yeah, now we're gonna actually get into like legitimate team building. So before you even get into what you want to use, the first mon, you might want to think about what is the purpose of this team, who is using this, what tournament is this for, and also, or you know, it could be a ladder team, it could just be a team that you're testing, but if the purpose of the team isn't super serious, then, you know, maybe you make it not a super serious team. Maybe it has a fucking Swall dude on it, you know. But if you're building a kind of serious team, then you should be thinking about, like, is this a team that tries to be a super hard C team? Because those can be the most rewarding teams out of anything. Because if you're hard C teaming your opponent, and they kind of bring what you expect them to, then if you get 3-0 after 3-0 after 3-0, that's amazing. That is, like, what more can you ask for? Because picking in 1v1 at the end of the day will always be semi-unreliable. You shouldn't go into the expectation that I'm going to go 7-0 because I will simply outpick all of my opponents. It doesn't happen. But I'm telling you right now, if you had 3 3-0s per series, you could absolutely go 7-0 in a given tournament. Easily. If you're having 3 3-0s, that is fucking simple. Or even 2 3-0s. Because if you're having 2 3-0s, all you gotta do is 3 your opponent twice and then win 1 out of 3 other games. That's pretty simple. As long as they're not getting absolutely smashed. You know.
Easier said than done.
I mean, absolutely. Yeah. But if you're, dude, think about if you had 2 3-0s per series. That is like all you can really ask for in a certain series. You know, you could prep for a week and then get 0 3-0s and lose. You know, but if you're getting 2 3-0s, then hard C teams, for players who have like very small usage, like maybe, you know, Bomb 21XD, or someone who doesn't play the tier and only uses, you know, their friend's team over and over and over. If you see that they only use like 1 or 2 teams, 1 or 2, maybe 3 teams, you can see teaming up very easily, especially if they have like shared weaknesses. But for most tournament games, you should be building a very soft C team ish. Plus being ready for the general meta. There's 3 types of teams in my opinion. There's hard C teams, soft C teams / teams that are trying to get a good matchup for your opponent but are good in the meta, and then the third type is just teams that are generally good for the meta and aren't really meant for a specific opponent. They all have their merits.
Bad team.
I mean, but at the end of the day, you kind of want teams that can somewhat fish on your opponent, but also have good meta matchups. That's generally what you're going to want to do. In like a team tournament, you're not really going to want to be hard, super duper Omega C teaming, and getting 3-0'd by like a Tapu Fini or something. That just doesn't really seem reasonable to me. But if it's like you're fighting someone in like an early stage of a round, and you know they just use the same shit over and over, go ahead. Or like maybe you're in seasonal and your opponent just keep bringing the same shit over and over, with little regards to actually switching, you know, C team them. Why not? But you know, soft C teams are generally going to be the best for tournaments, and teams that are built for just the general meta are great for like learning how to build in a certain tier. And I recommend people, you know, build teams that aren't just meant for opponents. You know, teams that are maybe meant for the certain meta at hand that you can easily use for opponents. You know, I can't tell you how many times that I've built a team like a year ago and just, you know, gave it to someone or used it myself because, hey, you know, it has a good matchup versus your opponent, you know, because, you know, certain mons, if you have a bunch of different types of mons in your builder, then it's gonna be used at some point, as long as the meta is not like super duper fast switching. I mean, I kind of have an old gens mindset where I can recycle a team from a year, 2 years ago, you know, and it's not a big deal. Obviously, that's a bit harder in SS, but I mean, that's only one slot, really. And plenty of teams that are kind of old in SS can definitely be revamped for the current meta if they have a foundation that allows it to be, you know, changed a bit. So yeah, now that you have a purpose in mind, I recommend, you know, a team that is meant for your opponent but also has a good meta matchup. You know, you're gonna want to get into the first mod that you want to build around, which is, you know, something that can be easy or kind of hard when you're like, you know, prepping for someone. You're like, hey, what do I really want to use versus them? Maybe they have like a pretty good usage and it's kind of hard to team them, but you kind of gotta decide stuff sooner than later. You know, get some ideas on the board. You know, if you're in a team tour, you know, talk with people. Yeah, you gotta like your teams do not build themselves unless you're using program, in which case they literally do build themselves. Absolutely, 100%. But this is not a video about the program at all. So yeah,
it's coming soon.
No, it is not. Anyways, so yeah, so you have your first mon, and there's two things you can do. I recommend filling in at least a good amount of the set. Maybe you have a certain coverage move that left if you're, you know, running like some random band or specs or scarf attacker. You know, maybe you want to have a certain coverage option or just EVs, or you haven't really decided what you want to EV for. You know, it maybe depends on the rest of the team. Then go for it. You know, I recommend you know, starting or having an open mind when it comes to, you know, the team that you're making. Yeah. So now you're gonna want to go down.
Sometimes you do just copy paste.
Yeah. You can copy and paste a set from someone else. You know, that's fine. But from here you're gonna want to say, okay, what is this shit weak to? I don't really have a specific team in mind. Maybe I'll just do, you know, standard ass God Squad. You know. Let's start off with Gyarados, for example, in RS. You're going to be thinking, okay, this thing kind of loses to Seal types, it kind of loses to Stall. So go down the VR, you know, and go down your opponent's usage, absolutely, if you have that available. For sure do that. And say, okay, what does this Mon, you know, lose to? And if we have, you know, Gyarados, for example, we've kind of decided that the first thing to tackle should maybe, you know, are Steel types and Stall. Gyara, let's say you're running Stone Edge Gyara, so you don't have to worry about, you know, Zard choosing you.
Zard.
Yeah, so there you go. So let's settle on, you know, Zard Y or Zard X. Doesn't really matter that much. If you're running Zard X, you should run Belly Drum, because otherwise you're gonna be losing to Slowbro, because Gyara really struggles. Especially Stone Edge. Stone Edge is like 0 chance, unless you like don't get burned a bunch and like crit through Shell Armor with Mold Breaker. So yeah, so you have Zard, you know, next, and Gyara Zard is absolutely fearsome, but it's not impenetrable, because, you know, these are two Mons that are megas. They're kind of bulky attackers. They're both fairly weak to stuff like Meloetta and PZ, you know, these special attackers that kind of try to beat them down. And also, if you're running Zard Y, Sableye Zard Y can be weak to Sableye, or Gyarados Zard Y can be weak to Sableye, depending on the set. So your third will be Mawile, because hey, you know, you beat all these normals. Mawile has some insane resistances. You know, ground and fire are really not issues for Gyarados whatsoever. Zard Y or Zard X covers, you know, Venusaur. So that's, you know, how the basic process works. But when you look at this team, if you're building around Zard or Gyara, you should be trying to get a good amount of top tiers out of the way as soon as you can. Your first two Mons should cover a lot of, you know, A plus S Mons, because otherwise, if you're not like worried about them and you're worried about these B plus B Mons, A minus Mons, then you're gonna have these unholy hit lists where it's kind of just impossible to tackle them. You should be kind of focused on beating the best Mons, because not only are those usually the most common Mons, but they're also the Mons that are most versatile. So if you are, you know, beating those faster, that's something I like to do, because, you know, for example, Zard in ORAS is kind of hard to beat with your third, because if you're factoring in, you know, sub, you know, make counter, God forbid, you know, even brick break, then you're gonna be having really weird hit lists or you're gonna be having really hard hit lists. Hit lists are like, you know, the list of mons you want to beat with a certain mon. So your hit list is going to be really tough if you beat, or if you're beating like these really low rank mons and not, you know, the high ranked mons. Your list might be something like Charizard, Venusaur, Slowbro. If you have those 3 mons, wrap it up, dude. There's like nothing that beats those besides like really weird Greninjas.
Something like Zard, Venubro, and ORAS is not like the best example, because those 3 all just lose to T-Bolt Latios, and also Meloetta and Togekiss. If they get like a few turns right, or get, you know, versus the right set, then they can win too. But definitely don't have like your Zard counter be like an ORAS, for example. Like, don't have your Zard counter be like a Togekiss or a Meloetta that just loses the sub, or if it gets hit 50 by sub. And then kind of like in you know, maybe in SM, don't like have your D-Knight counter be something that like just loses to the special Z move. I've definitely seen teams where like people will just not really have the best top tier matchups because they use a pretty flimsy check, because, you know, they're just trying to fill out a hit list without actually considering if that's the best situation possible. A hit list like, you know, Zard, Gara, Venusaur, Porygon Z, for example, would be like way more impossible, because they kind of have like decent synergy as mons.
Or like stuff like that. You want to get the top mons out of the way fast, because some lower ranked mons are matchup fishers, absolutely. That can be their whole goal. But generally, if you're having these good top tier matchups and having synergies where you're thinking about top tier matchups, then the lower ranked mons kind of check themselves, really. You know, they're lower ranked for a fucking reason. They're just generally not as good as, you know, a Charizard, you know, Dragonite, you know, something like that. Even like an A rank mon, like, you know, Mega Slowbro, or, you know, Tapu Lele. If you're not getting those out of the way, then you might just either lose to them or like really struggle with them with your third, because you might have to cut corners and be like, hey, I only beat, you know, slack off Slowbro instead of, you know, all Slowbros, because then you're just gonna lose to rest Slowbro or something like that.
And I'm not saying like, oh, only focus on top mon matchups when you're team building, because if you do that, you know, maybe you'll have like decent matches versus top mons, but then versus other stuff, maybe what people are using now, you're not going to be too good. But just try to focus on mons that, you know, do well versus the top mons and have synergy also, because sometimes you'll like beat you'll have good enough matchups versus like some top mons in your first 2, and then for your third, like the other top mons are like categorized so neatly that like you can just kind of run like, oh, a fire type, or oh, a Mega Gyarados, and then you just beat the rest of the ones you haven't previously beaten.
Another thing you should be thinking about is writing down what your mons lose to. Like I alluded to, you know, Metagross and Gyarados earlier. Open up, you know, Pastebin or text editor, you know, or Notepad or WordPad or whatever. Open that shit up and start writing down, hey, my Charizard loses, or my Gyarados loses to Steel types, Stall, type it out, Stall, Porygon Z, Meloetta, Electric types. That's another thing. I mean, ORAS Electric types fucking suck. This is an ORAS God Squad, by the way. It's not like SM God Squad, which seems like Magearna. And SM God Squad can struggle with Zero Aura, absolutely, for sure. What did you say? You kind of
definitely recommend doing slash weakness. I recommend doing slash weakness for this, but like unironically.
Yeah, okay, that perfectly transitioned to something I was going to just talk about. So, a good way to think about what your Pokemon are weak to and how to patch it up is to think about just types. You know, honestly, on some teams, it doesn't really matter if you have a Zard or a Victini or something like that, because they're both good as fire types. You know, they might have a bit of a bit of differences, but that maybe manifests itself in like your third beating of 1 or 2 different mons. You know, a lot of teams have like very similar structures. For example, in ORS, fire, grass, rock is something that is very solid. And you know, a lot of fire, grass, rock teams look similar. A certain team, it is I think it's Zard X, Superior, Diancie, right? In PL5, I saw 2 different people run that team that built them themselves. I DM'd them and they said, hey, I built this myself. And that team was something that I built in 2018. And it was my favorite PL2 team. And it's coming back 3 years later because the foundation is just that solid, you know. This type core manifested itself in the exact same mons, because this type core, hey, you know, it struggles with this mon, so you put on a Superior, and it struggles with, you know, Zard, so you put on a Diancie, and then that's that, really. A lot of teams look similar for good reason, because types make it so, you know, there's kind of a good backbone that, you know, covers the metagame, really. So types are crucial. So that's why I like Zard Y as a partner to Gyarados, because Zard Y destroys steel types, and steel types are, and also Zard Y can beat some normal types, which is not necessary because I'm Mawile on the third, but you know, you do have this fire water thing, which usually struggles with dragons, but Gyarados does not struggle with almost any dragon, or as not one, I'd say. So, you know, think about types. Think about, hey, this fire water team might be weak to, you know, dragons, but also I have a Gyarados, so it literally is not. That's something that will make you realize, hey, dude, you know, fucking Zard or Gyarados is good because, you know, it beats with its stat, or with its, like, you know, water and dark typing, it beats this mon, this mon, this mon, this mon, but it also kind of goes above and beyond and beats dragon types, which is good because Zardex is the best mon in the meta. And also something that Mawile does as a third is beat Kieran Black, because, you know, you resist like all its moves except Specs Earth Power, which you should be tanking. And yeah, that's why I think types are really useful. And also, something you should also be thinking about that's kind of similar to types is, like, what archetype of mon is this? You know, is this a fast attacker? Is this a bulky attacker? Is this a physical mon, a special mon, or a stall mon? Because kind of repeating the same archetype is kind of, if you're a beginner or an intermediate player, not very good. I wouldn't recommend building a team with 3 physical mons. I've seen someone like Potato Chan run 3 physical mons on one team, and that's fine because Potato Chan is super duper knowledgeable and ahead of Sword Shield, and his style of team building is more of a counter team than, you know, I need a rock solid foundation for this, because a rock solid foundation could be cool, but it's not going to earn you the 3 O's that will be immediately winning you games even if you suck ass.
3 physical attackers is not unsalvageable. But if you're trying to get your teams to the next level and trying to make more consistent teams, because, you know, maybe you've built a few good teams but the rest are kind of duds, I recommend, you know, if you're starting with the physical attacker, think about, hey, I kind of want to put a special attacker on this team at some point. It would just make a lot of sense. And yeah, just have that as like a habit of, like, oh, I'm not spamming like 2+ physical attackers or 2+ special attackers on each team. Because then, you know, you might get CT'd by like some random Stallmon or some random like Chansey or something, you know. Just try to branch out when it comes to structures, I guess, is my recommendation.
So I definitely recommend, you know, mix up your physical and your special attackers. Make it so your team isn't too frail. Maybe make it so your team isn't too stally. I'm not saying you need to build like this or this or this, but having kind of, it's honestly, it's kind of a noob thing to have like 3 physical attackers on one team in 1v1. because you know it's like you're stacking weaknesses. You're stacking mons that lose to Slowbro. You're stacking mons that lose to Sabla. You're stacking mons that lose to maybe Audino. You know, you're stacking mons that lose to Will-O-Wisp or Bulk Up, or just you are basically setting yourself up to not really address your actual weaknesses structurally. So if you have a physical attacker you're starting out with, think about having a special attacker as your second, and then if you're doing that, also have something like Chansey in mind. I mean, I don't know how common Chansey is these days, but Chansey can certainly punish certain structures where it's like a weak physical attacker that gets countered, and then a special attacker, and then something else. Think about, okay, what is like disrupting my structures that I'm actually using right now, right? And think about what you want to be doing to not repeat, physical attacker, physical attacker, physical attacker, or special attacker, weak physical attacker. Think about mons that can boost, think about mons that can stall, think about mons that just hit hard, and trying to kind of vary it up. Because if you're having mons that have these super different, these not maybe super different roles, but fairly different roles, where it's like this thing hits physical, this thing hits special, this thing stalls, then you're going to be covering a lot of bases with that type of thing. It's a pretty solid structure. I'm later going to get into one of my favorite teams that like is, very varied in its structure. It has a physical, special, and mixed attacker, and it has a fast mon, tanky mon, and kind of a mon that's in the middle. So if you're thinking about archetypes, then you're not going to be just losing to, random Scarfers, random stall mons, Chansey. If you're thinking about varying it up, then you have varying ways to win instead of one kind of goal. If you're running 3 physical attackers where, you're kind of trying to have the same goal happen in 3 different ways, which is a bit more linear than, hey, I have this fairly well-rounded team that, has some bulkiness, it has some quickness, and it has something somewhere in the middle. Because if that's the case, then you're gonna just be covering a lot of bases, and it's gonna be a bit harder to 3-0 because you're gonna have these more specific 3-0s instead of these more general 3-0s, where it's like, if you're running these really frail teams, then it's fairly easy to beat it. Your team is kind of going to be bending over backwards if it's 3 fast offensive mons to not, lose to something that beats 3 fast offensive mons. I'm not saying you can't, repeat certain like types of mons. You can run a fast team, you can run a bulky team. Bulky teams can be fucking good, but think about, hey, this variety can be good, or else I will be disrupted by things that try to disrupt this. Because, maybe think about something like Scarf PZ. Scarf PZ can fuck up a lot of fast teams that don't have a super solid backbone, because fast teams don't often, like, if you're fast, you probably don't have a fast deal type. Like, you're not using fucking Cobalion, I mean, there's Mega Metagross and SM, but you want to be thinking about, okay, how do I not lose to things that beat my archetype of mon? So if you're using a fast mon, like, I don't know. I mean, I go into this later, but if you're using like a Mega Lope and you think, hey, I need to not lose a Scarfer, so let me put on something on my team that's kind of bulky, because, Scarfers aren't great at getting, like, these Okos, right? So you can run like a fast mon plus a stall mon, or just a tanky mon, bulky mon, whatever. That type of shit is totally something you should be thinking about. You should be thinking about the more abstract things that beat your mons instead of just going mon by mon. You should be categorizing things that beat your mons. Think about, like, okay, these are the steel types that beat me, and these are, the stall mons that beat me because of this thing. These are the fast mons that beat me because they're fast, that can use this to beat me. Think about, kind of abstract things that manifest themselves in different, like, top mons. So if you're thinking about, hey, I want to steel type an Oras, you should be also, be kind of focusing in on, okay, I need a specific thing, and this mon is the best because it does X. So if you're thinking about steel types and Oras, you should be thinking, okay, if I'm weak to Sableye, then I should be using Mawile. If I'm weak to, Venusaur or Orlando T or something like that, I can use like a Metagross with either, Zen or Sub or Ice Punch. And if you're running like, if you're like, hey, I want a steel here that beats other steels, you should be thinking about maybe like a Reggie steel, you know, because Reggie steel has very good matchups versus other steels. It's actually very hard to beat Reggie steel as like a steel type. It's not too easy. And be picky with each mon that you use. You should not just say, okay, I'm gonna use Metagross because it's a steel type and that is that. Think about like, be very picky with your hit list, because if you're not, then you're gonna just lose to stuff sometimes. I mean, not always, you know, some players kind of have like some like top players have like a very good understanding of what complements what. But you should be thinking about synergy, and you should be thinking about the best mon for the job, because, you know, the best teams are good because they have 3 mons that are the best for what they do on that team. Because if that wasn't the case, then it wouldn't really be such a good team. It would just be an average team, you know. If you take a good team and swap out, you know, I don't know, like a Tapu Fini for a Primarina, there's going to be a lot of differences between that, right? If, you know, it's SM. If it's SS, I think they're kind of fucking similar, honestly. But I'm thinking about maybe SM, where, you know, Tapu Fini and Primarina are kind of very different, I'd say. Because Fini's way bulkier on like the physical side, for example, and kind of wants to secure 2 KOs when Prim would rather be OKOing, for example.
It's fair, yeah.
And
it's fair.
When you're team building, so for example, let's go back to Metagross. So if you want a steel type, say for example you're weak to, you know, PZ, Meloetta, you know, maybe some other psychic types, Gardevoir, for example. You're like, hey, I want a Metagross, or I want a steel type, and so you're thinking about Metagross, but you're also thinking, hey, this set is also weak to, as I said earlier, this set's kind of weak to Venusaur or Orlando T. So other steels may be absolutely garbage versus Orlando T or Venusaur. And if you need Metagross for the job because you think, hey, I appreciate this kind of bulky offensive mon that handles, you know, these mons that I want, then you should also be thinking about, okay, so let's beat Venusaur, you know, because Venusaur can be super obnoxious to have on your thirds list. A third is like, you know, you have your 2 mons and you're gonna finally round it up with whatever the fuck beats, you know, this list of mons, you know. Thirds, I am super not picky about. I will use a Lantern, I will use a Wooper, I will use whatever. And sometimes certain thirds let you explore a lot of options. And if I have like a really open thirds list, I'll say, hey, I've been thinking about, you know, maybe for example, Shaman and Oras, right? I remember I built a team with Shaman as a third because I'm like, hey, having Air Slash, Psychic, and Dazzling Gleam allows me to be good versus like Venusaur, Slowbro, Sableye, you know, type of shit, right? So thirds let you kind of explore certain options that you wouldn't normally like think about. For if you're thinking about seconds, I recommend just kind of going for good mons on your second mon, because it's like, okay, this mon has plenty of weaknesses, the metagame is huge, let's try to just beat as many of those weaknesses as possible. If you're running a Shaman second in Oras, like, why, bro? Like, why you want to use Shaman so bad? Like, if you're running, if you're that desperate to run Shaman, you know, either build around it or use it as a third. I don't really recommend kind of experimenting in the second slot if you're a newer player. Yeah, if you're good as fuck, you can think about, hey dude, let me like experiment with Shaman as a second, because it makes it so I don't have to worry about all these fucking stall mons. That's totally fair. I 100% think that's fine. And then your thirds list might be weird as fuck because you're running a Shaman as a second in Oras, but yeah. So think about being picky with your second mon. Try to beat as much as you can without wearing yourself thin, because, you know, at the end of the day, is Metagross going to beat, you know, both Charizard forms and Slowbro? No, not really, right? So you should be handling those in like, you don't need to beat every single mon with your second mon, right? So that's something Potato Chin likes to do. He likes to have these like super duper focused first and seconds with C teams, so that he can just get as good of matchups as possible, and then his third can be whatever the fuck he wants. But yeah, be picky with your second. Be very picky with your second, because the second you have like a very weak, middling first and second Mon core, then your third might just not be able to tackle everything, you know? It might be simply unable to beat, you know, Charizard, Slowbro, Venusaur, Porygon Z, Deoxys Speed. You know, I don't know why I named Deoxys Speed, that Mon fucking sucks, but, you know, that's just a random example of something that, hey, my opponent uses Deoxys Speed, so I should probably be covering Deoxys Speed. Your thirds shouldn't just be thinking about the top Mons, you should be thinking about, you know, your opponent's usage. If they spam Deoxys Speed, then fucking beat it, dude. Don't lose to it. So yeah, be picky about it, and, you know, think about, you know, the best Mon for the job for the second one, of like, hey, I want a Steel type because it beats normal types, Fairy types, you know, whatever, Kyurem Black, whatever, you know. And don't have the, yeah, like I said earlier, don't have the mindset that you need to beat the entire fucking metagame with 2 Mons. You don't, it's not very necessary. But when it comes to thirds, you should be thinking about your thirds, honestly, because if you're like, hey, for example, I'm only covering Porygon Z, Meloetta, and Stall, then maybe your third has to beat a lot. It has to beat a ton. And you want your thirds to also kind of fall under a categorization. Because if your third is easy, then, you know, maybe your third is just like Steel types and Stall. Then hey, you put a Charizard on here, and then you have a Zard, so that's great. It is good to run Zards. That actually leads me very well into my next point, which is to abuse the brokens, bro. Abuse the good Mons. Abuse the Mons with big EV potential. Abuse the Mons with extremely wide mood sets. Abuse the Mons that can run whatever items you want. Christopher, do you want to talk about how versatility is a good thing, or no?
Versatility is a good thing. Yeah. So like I can do that. So versatility. First of all, what it means is that your Mons have a lot of options. Right? For example, the most obvious example is Charizard and Oras, and an SM, but more so in Oras.
Definitely more so.
Because okay, so one thing is it has 2 forms, so it can literally be 2 that have completely different matchups, right? Well, most of this, they like beat each other's kind. Anyway, like you have Mons like that, and you load them onto Team Preview. They cause your opponent to have to think. Right? It's like a very basic thing. Your opponent having to think, like, to work with incomplete information. They have to guess what you have. They might completely guess wrong and make a pick that's wrong because of that. Because they were playing with incomplete information. And yeah, and also when you team build the one that's versatile, you can sometimes get away with like different dynamics within your team. I'm not saying you can just like completely lose, because you should be Charizard Y and your Charizard X, right? But it's like offers you different matchups when you use ones that are more versatile. You can think, oh, so my opponent is probably going to think that I'm Charizard Y here. However, I paired it with a, what's another slow roller? Like Landorus Therian, for example. It could actually be Specs Landorus instead and be Charizard X. And things like that just give you an advantage.
Yeah.
So you should like always look to do that. And also, like, a lot of these, and basically every 1v1 tier actually, you use top Mons, because Dom said spam the brokens, abuse the brokens. Like those Mons, like they all have a lot of sets. Every tier. Look at the VRs of every tier. The top Mons like SA+, they all have multiple. So it's sometimes most of the time you don't even have to use Mons that are versatile. But when you do try, and when you try to put together Mons that like put Mons together on a team that showcase versatility, that's when your teams, they become great.
Also, something I want to add to that is, you know, everyone knows that, you know, maybe a Charizard or a Kyurem Black is versatile, but you don't have to think of every Mon in such a linear way. You can kind of make these optimizations with other Mons and, you know, tackle certain threats in ways where you beat them pretty easily. Like, I mean, I'm gonna probably mention Victini like 5,000 times in this guide, but before, you know, Victini in current gen ORAS only used to run band. That's all it ran, right? But the second people ran, or I think it actually it ran Scarf maybe a little bit because, you know, Greninja lol, at Porygon-Z lol, but the second, you know, people started experimenting with, hey, this mon may not be, you know, perceived as something other than a choice band thread, but it absolutely has potential to be something else. You know, it can be a special attacker, because why the fuck not? Because if you're catching your opponents off guard with a special attacker, that's why like Spexlando T was initially good. I don't think it's very good now, but if you're catching your opponent with a strong special attack when they're expecting a strong physical attack, they will tackle that in completely different ways, especially because something like Victini and Lando T both have absolutely phenomenal special move pools that allow them to kind of make up for their lackluster special attacks by just hitting shit with, you know, strong moves like Blue Flare or like a strong Grass Knot, or maybe something like a Sludge Wave, maybe something like a Specs Psychic. Those are fairly strong moves, and if your opponent is not expecting them, that's the most menacing thing. You know, if you have like a kind of open mind in a team builder, that's really like the best you could be, because a lot of the best team builders ever are the most creative. You know, I like to think of Landon CP2, you know, TJOPW. Those guys don't really put limits on what their mons can do. And that's honestly one of the most scary things, if you're fighting someone who doesn't adhere to the metagame rules. So if you're, you know, thinking, hey, you know, maybe Mega Sableye ORAS, well, maybe I don't need Foul Play, maybe I can run Taunt, Wisp, Recover, Calm Mind.
Metal Burst.
Or Metal Burst, or something like that. You don't really need an attack as much. Actually, Taunt CM is fucking bad. I don't know why I use that example. But you could definitely try that out. I've seen some Taunt Amnesia Mew in you know, ORAS SM, and Black White too. I've seen it in Black White. I feel like Jim Sox like thinks that set is actually the best of all time. and like, while I personally think that set is bad because it kind of doesn't really align to my values of what Mew should be, you know, he could see Mew completely differently. And so the best type of thing is fucking thinking about mons in ways that no one is expecting, right? Because it's like, hey, you know, for this, you know, special attacking Mew, it can't touch me, so, you know. Actually, maybe that was a bad example, because I think people like Taunt Amnesia is fine, but I think it's more of a Amnesia Stoss thing. I think it's no Taunt.
Yeah,
okay, that's what I meant. Yeah, I meant Amnesia Stoss. I apologize. I'll like edit something in. I was thinking about Amnesia Stoss, because Taunt Amnesia, I totally fucked that up. Yeah, Amnesia Stoss is because, okay, say for example, you have like a fire type special attacker, and you're like, hey, I'm not really scared of Mew because it's not going to do any damage to me, and it can't out PP stall, it can't out recover me, but then it starts tossing you, and you're like, wow, I just was not prepared for this situation, you know. I was thinking about Mew in this very linear way, and I got fucking punished for it. Something like that, you know. Or thinking, hey, why can't my fucking Mew be, I mean, people don't really run this, but, you know, why can't Mew be a physical attacker? Why not? You know, in Black White, maybe it's always a special attacker or Stallmon. Why can't you just run physical Mew, you know? If that has advantages to running physical Mew, then that's great. You know, you have weight, you have good coverage, but don't just use a physical Mew to use a physical Mew, right? You should have, you know, a reason of thinking of a mon outside its perceived lens.
Mew is obviously an extreme example because that mon's like limitless, but
that's kind of the thing. In 1v1, you're gonna have these mons that have these crazy move pools, these crazy EV options, these crazy item options, and that's just what it is. So as a builder, if you're making sets that win games in alternative ways than the current like standard sets do, then you can find yourselves like getting some surprisingly good tournament wins, because, you know, some examples would be like Flail Lopunny in ORAS, Specs Lele in SM, and Thief Coco in SS. You play around the base mons in a very like predictable way. Oh, you know, Leia's gonna see him and then Z move me, or Leia's gonna reflect, so I have time. Or Coco's just gonna stall, but then it attacks me. These are type of things where if you catch your opponent off guard, you might just end up winning in a matchup you shouldn't, or you might just give yourself a small advantage at preview that you can coast to a win. You gotta fucking make the most of it, and if you know you're sagging behind and not using these broken mons, these versatile mons, these good mons, like I've seen teams where people will run in ORAS, they'll run like Entei Blastoise, and then like a filler that's also like a B rank mon. Like, why are you just having 3 B rank mons on your team? Like, I feel like you're at that point always going to be playing the game from behind, because for example, something like Zard Y, if your Rock Helmet Entei, which was designed to be better versus Zardex and Kieran Black, that shit just gets air slash flinched, and then by Y, and then you lose the game. You have to hit a Stone Edge to air slash, which is ridiculously difficult in practice.
0% chance.
It's very, very tough to do something like that. Think about the odds, and think about, hey, if I was using something that was not an Entei, if I was using, I don't know, I mean, or Heatran, for example. If you're using a Heatran, then you're not really bending over backwards to run, fire type that beats both Zards. It's really not that hard, dude. You don't have to use Entei, you don't have to use Mega Blastoise, you don't have to use, like, I don't know, ORAS Deoxys Speed, even though I think ORAS Deoxys Speed is cool. You should be, I would say, running 1 to 2 good mons per team. If you're intermediate beginner.
Arguably, you should run good mons.
I mean, dude, people, that's not even that intuitive to some people, like, genuinely. Some people, like, ooh, C rank mon, I love this thing. Better partner with B rank mons. Like, some people literally think like that because they don't like to use, the best mons. Because, that's too normy or whatever. But that's not really something that, like, top players ever really put themselves through. Unless they're, like, building at 4 AM and they're like, hey, bro, what if I used Duranpaw and Toxtricity on the same team? Or Vikavolt, or whatever the fuck, like, top players can kind of do that shit, and that's kind of how I remember in mid SM, like right before things kind of changed in SM. Kentaro was like, there's a maximum of 1 Heatmon per team unless your party's over, or I don't know, Elite Champion. I don't know if he mentioned Champion, but that's just a random guy that came to my mind. Or testing swag. There's people that can get away with thinking it, like, if you combine a bunch of anti-meta threats, that can be really good, but if you don't have a good foundation of either the tier or your team, then it can kind of like go nowhere. Because I've built teams that are theoretically anti-meta. I remember I built this one in SM that was like Azu, Celebi, Marowak, Alola. But that team was bad, and not even because it has bad mons, but just because it has too many bad mons, and
too many unviables.
And it's more that those mons don't really have a solid foundation. Azu and Celebi don't really provide a super duper solid foundation on a team that you're going to want to succeed. Think about foundations. Think about your first 2 mons giving yourself a foundation, because if you don't, then you're gonna be like running in circles to not get 3-0'd by a lot of stuff. So yeah, I recommend definitely limiting yourself when it comes to heat if you're not like super duper, like, I'm just gonna say this in general because I don't think top players will learn a ton from my video. They're gonna be sifting through a ton of basic shit for basic people. Like, I'm not gonna keep elaborating, top players this, top players that. You, like, add solid foundations to your team, and if you're not super duper confident in yourself, or even if you are confident, if you're just not that good, then don't be, throwing together mons that are just not on the VR or ridiculously low, right? So yeah. My next concept that I'm gonna want to get into is dynamic team building. So, okay, let's say, for example, you're running a Gardo. I mean, this is not going to be, like, a good team. I'm just thinking about this, like, off the dome, right? So think about actually, okay, I'm gonna think about Meluetta in Orias. Okay, for example. So then you decide, hey, I want to add a Zard Y to my team, right? So what I think is you should be team building dynamically. A lot of the time, you don't have to, but you should be team building with. Okay, this team is not fully done. It is a work in progress, so I will treat it as such. So what you're gonna want to do is add, a Zard Y to your team builder, Charizard Mega Y, right? And then add the moves that are good as fuck and actually like get the job done. Blast Burn, Air Slash, Solar Beam, right? But then when it comes to dynamic team building, is you could potentially leave the last slot open of the move, because Zard Y does not need 4 standard moves to function and get the job done, Arguably, you can drop Solar Beam or Air Slash if you really need to. Top players can do that type of shit. They can cut those corners if they're getting a really solid, perceivable reward, right? But you're gonna want to just run good sets if you're not like fucking hard pressed to cut corners, right? So you have the Blast Beam, Air Slash, Solar Beam, but you don't really have a 4th move. Good Mons are good a lot of the time because they have a lot of flexibility that can get your team to the next level, right? So, maybe your B rank Mon like Entei, if you're running Helmet Entei in RS. I mean, most of the people that are watching this video don't know a goddamn thing about Helmet Entei, probably. But basically, the moves are Sacred Fire, Stone Edge, Extreme Speed, and Endure. And Stone Edge is for Charizard and Kieran Black. E-Speed is for like finishing stuff off because Entei's not that strong without like a choice band, and then Endure is to maximize Rocky Helmet damage on your opponent. And also Rocky Helmet in ORAS, it activates after you die, and then that if say you're at 6% and then you hit the Entei with Rocky Helmet, right, then they win the game. That's just an ORAS mechanic. I mean, it's like that in Black White DPP, I believe. DPP, that's a tie, but it's like that in Black White. It changed in Gen 7, but...
it also doesn't exist.
Yeah. Endure is... just for finishing stuff off. But that's an example of a mid-tier Mon that has to kind of bend over backwards to beat the stuff it wants to beat. It, has 4 moves and an item, The EVs, I don't know if they matter a ton. I mean, I made my EV spread and that's that, but... that Mon is it does not have a lot of flexibility in that role because it is not that good and is using all of its tools at once to beat, a few Pokemon, right? And the best Pokemon don't require this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool. SM Primarina, for example. Water move. I don't remember what the thing's called. I genuinely have no idea. Moonblast. And people like an Aqua Jet for finishing things off, but you don't need Substitute, or you don't need Encore. Those are just lat slots that, you should be using depending on your team. Stuff like that, A lot of, Specs attackers or Band attackers, they don't need 4 specific moves to function. They have good coverage that can be used dynamically. So, what I recommend for the Zard Y example is to leave the last move blank, and then what you can do is, for example, Toxic Zard Y is good for Mega Altaria, Confide Mega Altaria specifically, because otherwise Wisp Air Slash should beat it because of Aura Burn. But Toxic is good for just beating all Mega Altarias pretty much. Maybe not like certain HP rocks, but that's not very common at all. And then, so you have the Toxic option, but you also have maybe a sub option for, I don't know, fucking Togekiss, for example. So if you're struggling versus Togekiss and Mega Altari, for example, what you can do is in your hit list, so write the things down that you lose to. Not saying you have to, but that's my process that I recommend other people do, because a lot of the time I've been too lazy to write down hit lists, and then I'll forget about a Mon, and then it will bite me in the ass, right? So if you're being lazy with your hit list for your third, then you will potentially suffer. I've seen it happen a lot. Lazy thirds, lazy seconds can be bad, and yeah. Basically, what you should be thinking is, hey, I need if you're doing this dynamic team building thing, I need to beat Togekiss or Mega Altaria. Write that down, like write Togekiss or Mega Altaria, and then all you really need to do is beat one of those, and then you can go back on your Charizard Y and then fucking put the last move. Because if, for example, your last beats Togekiss, say for example you're running I don't know, a Luxray, and Luxray for this example loses to Cotton Guard Mega Altaria, then you throw on Toxic, right, and you have a fucking Luxray. I don't know why I mentioned Luxray, but here we are, right? So you have this dynamicness where you go back and finish, you know, a certain part off. That there's no real reason that you need to decide, hey, this is my last Zard Y move, because then you're just limiting your third to be potentially harder than it needs to be. I'd like to have like the most easy thirds to tackle most of the time. Easy thirds are better than staring at the team builder for 30 minutes and trying to find an RU Mon that beats whatever. Yeah, and as someone who kind of has built a shit ton, let me tell you this, bro. I have had so many difficult thirds that waste way more time than they need to. And then I have to go back and make changes because this thirds list is fucking impossible. I can't beat Charizard, Venusaur, Slowbro, Landorti, Mega Altaria, Luxray, whatever. You know, I can't beat all these mons in one. There's just too many fundamental issues. Because a lot of the time, I've seen people either toss me thirds, or I've seen thirds myself, or hit lists specifically. I've seen people give me hit lists, or I've seen my own hit list hit a point where you can actually make a viable team out of the 3 mons, or 3 out of many mons in the list. Because that's when you fucking should be raising the flag, right? You should be giving up defeat on this thirds list if there's like so much synergy in these thirds that you can't actually tackle it. So if, for example, there's like stall and a really strong like metaphysical attacker and certain, you know, special attackers that are like all super high ranked in like completely different mons, the second you try to like beat like 8 completely different mons that have like varying ways of beating the things that they want to beat, your thirds list might be fucking hard, dude. So that's why I recommend giving yourselves the easiest thirds you possibly fucking can. Because, you know, if you're limiting yourself, yeah, maybe you have a fine thing on this team, but if you limit yourself in the future, your thirds might become worse on this team, and your team might become worse than it has potential to be, because you're just kind of close-minded thinking, okay, you know, these 2 flexible mons in the first 2 slots, I'm not gonna tweak or edit whatsoever. I'm going to just have a closed mind, and I will be stubborn as fuck with this thirds list. I've been stubborn as fuck with like 15 different thirds lists, maybe 20, and it has taken hours to finish those. Or I'll give up. I'll change the mons because I keep trying to make this third work, or this, yeah, a certain third work that I can't beat this and this and this and this and this and this and this, because I am ridiculously picky about my seconds and my thirds. I like to think about everything I can, as much as I can, on your thirds. You should be covering your whole opponent's usage. I mean, if they're like an SM player who's been playing under their main for 4 years, okay, yeah, maybe you can't fucking cover a fucking Mega Glalie or a fucking Mega Lucario they used 3 years ago, whatever, it's fine. But if you're looking at your opponent's most usage stuff and their most relevant stuff and their most recent stuff, then you should be picky as fuck and try to cover as much as you can. And cover the things that are not on the usage too, because there's no reason your opponent can't fucking bring them on that they haven't brought before. You know, that happens all the fucking time. So I think you should be picky as fuck with your thirds, and your process should allow you to make thirds easy. Thirds should be fun. Thirds should be, hey, I'm finding a cool set that actually is good as fuck, because, you know, this constraint helped me. These mons that, you know, people haven't really thought about beating all in one, you know, I'm gonna do it right now. Why not? You know, think of something new. For your seconds, I recommend trying to be solid. And for your thirds, I recommend trying to patch up holes and solidify the team. And, you know, think about archetypes. Think about not having 3 physical attackers. Think about not having 3 special attackers. Think about not having 3 super duper fast mons that, you know, lose to sturdy or scarfers or whatever, you know. Think about archetypes in your thirds. Think about being picky on your thirds. Think about making the best team you can. Because I personally find that when I take time on my thirds, and that I don't just say, I'm going to use a Mega Gross, or I'm going to use a Gardevoir, or I'm going to use a fucking Manaphy, that's like, you know, the standard Custap Tail Glow shit. If you really get picky, that's when you get like just a super solid basis. I want to talk about like mons that kind of excel as thirds. Christopher, do you have any SS examples of mons that you find to be pretty good thirds in SS? I mean, this will date the video because SS always changes, but what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. Thirds in SS?
I'd say Feeny.
This is like such a variable thing. Tapu Fini is like the best glue in the tier.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely one. Fini Celesteela.
Regidrago can be a third if you're not worried about fairies. Because think about it this way: if you're totally covered the meta stuff that you should be covering in the first 2 mons, you know, not saying you cannot have your thirds, you know, beat a Charizard or a Sylveon. That's totally fine. And oftentimes, if you kind of make something creative that beats those, then you get something great. But try to make thirds that are easy as fuck. And the second you have like, okay, since I covered, you know, steals and fairies on my SS team right now, I can kind of get creative with this Regidrago set. I passed Brian this like laser focus Fire Fang Regidrago for, I think, Scizor, because Regidrago was just a great fit. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna push this to the next level because, hey, I wanna beat Scizor, because, you know, it's not a big deal if I don't beat Scizor. I had Scizor covered in another mon, but I'm like, hey, I'm gonna try to get a better matchup versus Scizor to get more 3-0s, you know. If it's just 3-0 list, or if your hit list for your third is simple as fuck, then you can go above and beyond. Look at their usage and be like, hey, I have a really good core in my first 2 mons. Maybe I can 3-0 fish a little bit. You know, that's totally fine. I recommend having a very open mind for your thirds, actually. But the second you get hard thirds, it can be kind of taxing. I don't know. It's just a bit annoying. And yeah, back to the Regidrago example, you know, if you allow yourself to kind of push them on like Regidrago forward, because, you know, your intended purpose of the team wasn't, hey, I need to make this epic super duper swag Regidrago set, but if you're kind of giving yourself the opportunity to as a third, that's great. I personally excel as a team builder in my thirds. My thirds, I like to have mons that are like anti-meta as my thirds, because, you know, maybe this list is a little weird, or maybe a lot of players wouldn't go this thorough on their hit list, but I'm going to be picky as fuck. I want to not set guess. I want to just have a very solid basis for this team, and that's why I think thirds should be fun. Thirds have been not fun for me when I'm like trying to beat this ridiculous pool of mons that you can't really do. And if you find yourself with an impossible third, you know, and I recommend, honestly, at an intermediate level, don't have limits for thirds. Go far. You know, if it's like, dude, I need a fucking fire type that, you know, beats a fucking Tapu Fini, then maybe go for it, you know. If it's not like a super tough thing to do, then why the fuck not? If you need to venture into RU, that's not really a huge deal. If you're new as fuck, I wouldn't recommend, you know, bringing RU mons, but if you're intermediate, why not, you know, I mean, Rotom Heat is kind of a, like, very known mon, but, I mean, that's something that can be a good third across, like, multiple gens. And, I like, for thirds, I also like to think about, okay, you know, for example, let's go back to the Charizard thing. Okay, I want, you know, something that beats these normal types, something that beats Karen Black. Think about it from a types perspective. You know, a steel type that beats Sableye. Bam, there you go, Mawile, right? That's your fucking, that's your, I like to think of it in types, because thinking about things in types, makes it a bit easier than like trying to just think, okay, I want to beat this, or I want to beat these mons with this mon. Nope, it isn't possible. Nope, it isn't possible. Nope, it isn't possible. And you keep going through this list of mons. But when you think about, okay, I'm going to search on the PS Team Builder a fire type, and then I will find one that beats water types, or I'm going to find a steel type that beats Sableye. Then there you go. Because a lot of meta optimizations isn't about, you know, beating like everything. It can be about beating Pokemon that are kind of commonly paired together, right? So that's why maybe, you know, Mawile is good in Oris, because it's a steel type that beats all these annoying things, and it also beats Sableye. It offers so much in one mon that it's so good because of that. It's definitely better than Metagross, because the stuff it beats are harder to beat in general. So by, you know, using a Mawile, you are just getting one of the best steel types you can, because, you know, it just beats all this important shit. So yeah, think about types. Think about, like, you know, sometimes the types can be conflicting in your thirds list, you know, or in your hit list for your third, but that's not the biggest deal if your thirds list is just not that hard to beat. If it is super hard to beat, then fucking adjust your core, because it's probably not rock solid then if your list is impossible. And I personally, for my first and second, sometimes I will like to have, you know, a solid but maybe a little experimental ground. Because, for example, I'm thinking about this one team I made in Oris. It was Serp Heatran, right? And, you know, they have some synergy, you know, Heatran beats Zard and shit, but usually Regiserp and its variations has been, you know, a grass type, and then a steel type that is not Heatran, and then a third that, you know, is like a dragon type or something that beats fire types. But I was thinking, hey man, I'm gonna try grass Heatran, which is not super duper common on, you know, grass steel dragon teams. So like, I kind of want to fucking push this forward. And then my third ended up being this really weird Goodra that it was like Protect, Endure, Draco Meteor, Outrage. It was a fucking mess, but it kind of does what I needed it to do, because with this Goodra, this third list was really fucking hard, but I still had the Grass Steel Dragon Foundation, so there was still some solidness with that. And also, I was just picky about, hey, I need to beat Lopunny, I need to beat Manaphy, I need to beat fucking whatever the fuck. And yeah, that was just a pretty picky list of mine with like kind of experimental first and second, you know, or first and second mon that kind of made me have to bend over backwards in the third list, but I did it. It was fine, you know. It was doable. So let's talk about, you know, the last step. So once you have your third that beats, you know, your fucking Porygon Z, your Mellow, your Sableye, right? You know, let's say God Squad, let's go back to that. Then, you know, you fill out your Mawile set. You run Taunt or SD depending on what you want, you know, maybe Taunt. You can run Taunt SD as well, because, you know, with Charizard you're not super weak to Genesect, so you don't need Burst as much, and Taunt SD has very feasible benefits versus Sableye, Whimsicott, which can give Charizard a good amount of trouble. Both those mons can, so, you know, maybe you decide to run Taunt plus SD Ma, maybe you run Taunt Burst Ma, maybe you run SD Burst Ma. It doesn't really fucking matter for this example. But, you know, once you decide, hey, I want the Spadef Ma because I don't want to lose his Specs, Cure, and Black Earth Power, then the final step is going back and seeing on your team, hey, this team has 3 mons, but that does not necessarily mean that it is done. So you can go back and make moveset tweaks, because, hey, you know, maybe your first 2 mons kind of subconsciously dump on something else that isn't really common in, say, your opponent's usage, but if you make this moveset tweak, then it is way better versus your opponent's usage. And if you're already like having 2 mons, maybe even 3 mons that dump on a certain thing, then, you know, you don't really need overlapping coverage as much. You can kind of go for coverage that beats, you know, more important things or more relevant things that either in the meta or your opponent have. For example, if you were running Energy Ball, Meloetta, and a Zard Y, you don't really need an Energy Ball, Meloetta if you have a Solar Beam Zard Y, right? Grass coverage is not something that you need on every single fucking Mon. So you can go back, and maybe your third doesn't beat Diancie, so you're like, hey, I'm gonna run HP Steel Meloetta because my third is not very good versus Diancie. And I mean, Energy Ball and HP Steel, I think both do the same thing, but it depends on your EVs actually, because I think regular Diamond Storm into Mega Diamond Storm might be able to roll some Melos. But say for example you need EVs that like make it so you get rolled, you could just say, hey, fuck this shit, I'm gonna run fucking Specs HP Steel, and then Diancie is fucking dead. I mean, I don't know the calc, maybe HP Steel doesn't kill Diancie, but it probably fucking does, honestly. Meloetta is strong as shit. So yeah, look at your overlapping coverage, look at your overlapping EVs, you know, look at your overlapping items. You know, maybe you're running like band to band, you're like, hey, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't recommend actually tweaking if you have like 2 band mons. It's not actually the biggest deal. I wouldn't really recommend you run just Ooga Booga 2 band mons if you're newer. Try to like work on more varied teams for sure. But if you do find yourself doing band, I actually wouldn't really go back and edit that. That's kind of the type of thing that you want to like really solidify in your first 2 mons, right? You don't really need to go back and like totally change the purpose of your set. But if you're realizing, hey, these 3 mons have potential, but this band shit makes it so I have to set guess versus way too much, and if I lose, or if I don't set guess right, then I lose, then maybe you can run, you know, fucking a Scarf on one of those band mons, because, you know, your team isn't done yet. I mean, I wouldn't recommend just saying, hey, I have 2 choice band mons, I need to change that immediately. But if you're not satisfied with your results, or you think your team can undergo some adjustments, right? You know, 3 mons doesn't mean your team is fucking done. So you go back and say, hey, I don't want to set guess Dragapult or any, you know, I don't want to set guess Dragapult or Darm or whatever in SS, right? So then you make your fucking whatever mon Scarf, and then you don't have to set guess anything, right? And if there's no opportunity cost, because you should still have your seconds and thirds like hitless, you know, somewhere probably. You shouldn't just delete it. If you do have those available and you're like, hey, I can just make this thing Scarf, and then my team is way better versus these mons that are kind of versatile, then your team gets better, you know, for no cost really. You don't need, you know, 2 choice band mons that have to set guess equally as hard versus the same shit. Then that's like the fucking thing that is like worth thinking about, you know. You should ask yourself after this team, after you build your 3 mons, and you look back at everything and everything looks good, you should ask yourself, am I completely satisfied with this? Is this the best that it can be? Because if it's not the best it can be, then why even keep it like that? Go fucking change like some EVs or maybe a mon. If you're thinking, hey, actually I can run a Zard X instead of Victini as my third or as my second because, you know, my third beats this specific thing, then if Victini doesn't feel right on that team, or Zard, you think, hey, Zard would be better because, you know, my third covers everything that Victini would cover normally, then go fucking think about making it a Zard. Make your teams the best they can be. Make your team something that you're really proud of and you think is heat. I know Cruz can back me up, but when I'll build like a super good team that I'm like super satisfied with, you know, I've checked everything, you know, I make sure that this the moves are all good, the EVs are all good, you know, the nicknames are good. That's the most important part, you know.
That is the most important part.
Yeah, facts. So once you're fucking satisfied with that, I will think to myself, damn dude, this team is sexy, this team is good. Like, as someone who has built a ton and played a ton, I can kind of tell when a team I've just made is good as fuck. And I've had the situations where, you know, I've in 1 week, for example, in PL5, I was building a fuck ton for Tiebreaker, and when I was building these teams, I was thinking to myself, wow dude, this team loses to this, and this, and wow, this team loses to this. I was like, I suddenly, like, that's not usually something I do. I used to be like a very friendly heavy player because I wouldn't really realize what my team loses to immediately, but when I started building so much, I'd be like, okay, I started like learning, wow, okay, this structure of thing loses to this structure of this loses to this, but you shouldn't like think about your team's weaknesses. You should be thinking, wow, this team is fucking sexy. And I'm satisfied. Something I just stress is to be picky as fuck when you're building. I am picky as fuck in teams in general. If any player asks me, hey, what do you think of this team? I will say in ORAS that it fucking sucks and I hate it. Because I am super particular about what I use. I like to not set guess. I like to have really good Zard answers. I like to, you know, try to have good Sableye matchups. I like to just have, like, you know, a variety of, you know, bulky offense, fast offense, stall, you know, physical, special, whatever. I like to have these teams that just generally cover as many bases as they can. And if you ask me what I think about your ORAS team, I might just say it sucks. Because does it suck? No. But I don't like it. Because I am so ridiculously fucking picky about what I use. You know, if you're building for this long, if you're like a mass builder, if you're someone who's built for a ridiculously long amount of time, then you kind of just get better at it, you know, most of the time. Unless you're like 5 Luke, you know. But, you know, fucking...
That's the GOAT.
I mean, that is the GOAT, but he doesn't really try that hard. But that, I mean, my example, this video is for tryhard, so I'm saying, if you keep building, then you kind of get... You should become a pickier builder over time. Your teams should be better the more you build, instead of, you know, being a straight line. So be picky about your fucking teams. Maybe you're not that picky right now, and maybe your team loses to fucking Darmanitan Galar when your opponent has used Darmanitan Galar 5 times, right? You know, something like that. Fucking be picky with your second and your thirds and your first. You should be picky about every single mon you use because it should be the best first job, like I said earlier. That's what I have to say about that. I generally
Any
just...
other points you want to make?
Do you have any? I think I'm almost done.
I think you did a good job.
Do you have any that you want to make, though?
Alright, no. I'm good.
Okay, so yeah, this is about ending. I basically... if you were zoned out for however fucking long this recording is, here's what I'm gonna say as conclusion. Have a purpose for your team. Obviously, we're beyond the meta knowledge point. Know the fucking meta, obviously. Watch games, and then, you know, have a good mon to build around. I mean, that's kind of simple. Like, if you're just racking your brain, you know, you find a good mon to build around, you know, for your opponent or just for something you like in the meta. It's not that finding something to build around is usually not the hard part, right? And then, you know, write down, hey, this mon loses to all this shit, right? And, tackle a good chunky amount of it with your second mon. You know, as I said, write down your mons, maybe categorize them so it's like, hey, these stall mons, you know, these fucking steel types, you know, these fire types like Charizard, Heatran, whatever, you know. I recommend writing them down and having them like be very like on your mind when you're building, because if they're not, then, you know, maybe you get 3-0 by fucking Mega Charizard X and ORAS. It fucking happens. I've built teams with really shaky Zard matchups. If I'm like C teaming usually, and I'm like, hey, I don't fucking, hey man, I'll just hope that they think that I'm Zard X with sub instead of Zard Y, which I actually am. So that's just an example. That's not something I do that often, but I do recommend to just be like pretty thorough with your second, but you don't need to beat everything. Don't try to beat everything, because once you try to beat everything with your second, then sometimes you beat nothing. Sometimes you have 6 EVs and then all of them don't, like, they don't work together. Or sometimes you you know, drop Meteor Mash on your Metagross and you're like, hey, Bullet Punch is fine. It's not. Do not drop that shit. You know, don't try to cover every single possible base with your second. Sometimes if you're C-teaming someone, your first and second mon can beat like damn near everything that they use. And then, you know, maybe your third mon is just covering the holes that your meta, or the meta holes that, you know, maybe your opponent doesn't use that much, but just in case they do. And so yeah, I would say definitely the second mon is definitely your biggest platform to use a good mon. Use a fucking good mon for your second mon, because that builds the foundation for the team. And for thirds, I recommend, you know, still writing down what you need to beat your thirds, and have an open mind, but also don't have your mind so open that you think, yeah, I can beat Charizard, Venu, you know, Dragonite, Kieran Black, Slowbro, fucking Garchomp,
boys,
whatever. Like a good overlap, or like mons that are just really varied, that have like no, like very little commonality. when it comes to checks and counters. So you should be, you know, having thirds that are, you know, you have an open mind, but it's not too open. Your thirds should be fairly easy to tackle. I mean, they won't always be. I've had demon third list, and if your list is too hard, then, you know, think, okay, you know, this idea with my first and second Mon worked, but maybe it didn't really, you know, fully pan out. Maybe I'll make a copy of this team and try something new with my second Mon. Maybe I'll scrap this for a later moment because I can't fucking be asked to spend 60 minutes looking for an optimal third. And I recommend taking a long time for thirds, genuinely. And then for thirds, yeah, have your mind open, you know, write everything down, and just think in your mind, okay, my team needs this to become good, you know. Think about it in types, think about it in archetypes, think about it in terms of something that's a little maybe beyond the hit list, because, you know, a hit list is just a fucking hit list, you know. You don't always need to have, you know, monsters your opponent has never used 0 times on your hit list. I recommend doing it, having them on your hit list, even if they use it 0 times, and then if you're like, okay, this hit list is hard, maybe I can drop it, then, you know, you drop it, because, you know, my other Mon, you know, looks like it beats this Mon, and they never use it, so it's totally fine that, you know, I lose to it, because, you know, teams lose to stuff, believe it or not. It's kind of crazy, but every team has 3 O's.
That's crazy.
Except, you know, Zard, Gera, Mon, that actually is like 0 3-0s, kinda. But you can make a Greninja that beats it for sure. I'm just trolling. I think, actually maybe not. I think Mon and Gera actually can't really beat a 1-Gren set. If one of them is Def.
Yeah, you definitely can.
So, you know, that's the type of thing that you shouldn't be tackling. You shouldn't be tackling Zard, Gera, Mon your thirds, and then, yeah, like I said way earlier, get your fucking, I'm just repeating myself at this point, but, you know, maybe you forgot some shit, maybe you zoned out, cover, like, as many annoying Mons as you can in the first and second. You don't need to cover every annoying Mon and then just spend your fucking third, you know, beating fucking B rank Mons. But B rank Mons come way more naturally to beat than fucking A+ rank Mons or S rank Mons. So get your get most of your good Mons out of the way, and think about what S rank Mons you can beat in one, because, you know, fucking, it's not like you can't ever beat 2 S rank Mons. Like I've mentioned this Zard Venu slow burst shit a lot, but, you know, it's not like you can't beat fucking I don't know, low punny and Zard in one, because, you know, Diancie or Megal or like certain Altarias or, you know, whatever, right? It's not like you can never beat 2 good Mons or 3 good Mons, but you should be using your like knowledge of the meta to say, okay, this thirds list is manageable, or this thirds list is not manageable, I need to make changes. And then after you have your third that you're going to be picky as fuck about, you go back, you look at your EVs and think, hey, maybe I don't need this EVs, maybe like spending 400 EVs to beat this Mon that is an 03 is not actually worth it. So then, you know, you re-EV your Mons to make them the strongest or fastest or bulkiest they can be, and then you also have, you know, overlapping coverage that maybe doesn't need to be there. You know, go change that if you need to. Think about if it's in tournament. Think about, okay, you know, maybe I don't need this random filler move. Maybe I can have something that's way better versus my opponent. And then after you have fucking, you know, looked over your team a final time, you should, if you're confident that all 3 Mons are the best they can be on this team, then you should think to yourself, this team is fucking good, and I like it. If you're not thinking that, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't use it, maybe you should keep building until you totally find your style. Style, this is like the actual like last point that is not repeating. I totally should have wrote this down, but I didn't. Style is the most important part of building. Build teams for the person who is using them. You don't need to build a team that fucking 10 other people would fucking think is the best thing ever, and that they would need to use it immediately. Build shit that you are totally content with using because it is your style, you know. That's the most important thing. Build teams for the person using it. Most often it's going to be you. Sometimes it's going to be your teammate. Think about that when, you know, hey, this team, I'm building for my teammate because, you know, he's playing a different gen. think about, hey, fucking, I need to make sure that they feel comfortable using it, and ask them maybe, you know, do you like this team? If they say yes, great. If not, you know, work with that. Work with your teammates. Like, why force your teammates to use something that, you know, they wouldn't really use? Because maybe if it's like in playoffs of a tournament, you're not going to be wanting to, you know, force them to use something that they don't like. You know, getting out of your comfort zone is absolutely amazing as a builder. Get out of your comfort zone when you can, and it's low risk too, but don't make these situations where you're getting out of your comfort zone in high risk situations and risking a lot because, hey man, you know, everyone's fucking using Reggie Drago, and even though I hate Reggie Drago, you know, I'm gonna try to make it work. And if I don't make it work, I lose the game and lose playoffs for my entire team, you know? I mean, you should be using good mons. But for example, in ORAS, I hate Porygon Z. I never use Porygon Z. It satisfies almost nothing that I think about when I'm building a team. I think there are better mons that beat Fat because, you know, for example, Specs PC is helpless versus, you know, Sableye. It's not really good versus Zards. It's not good versus Steels. That mon to me satisfies nothing in my team builder. So you don't need to use, you know, this A rank mon because everyone else uses it. You know, find out what you like and what you don't like. And once you start like building a bunch of teams and using a lot of variety, you're gonna find what you do and do not like, and that's great. That means that you can become a better builder. That means you have a better grip on what is good in the meta. I mean, that part of, you know, what's good in the meta is people's opinions, but if you're using a lot of different teams and Pokemon, then you are definitely learning. You're definitely finding stuff out about, you know, your style, you know, all this shit. Do you have anything else to say about style? I think you should just be building for your own style. My style is that I like my teams to be easy to use, and I like to minimize set guessing. I mean, I encourage other people to have the styles because when you have those type of mindset that, hey, this team should be easy to use, I shouldn't bend over backwards versus top tier mons, then you kind of find yourself making good teams. If you're picky about, you know, your mons, you're picky about, you know, your synergies, they need to be super synergistic. And sometimes if you make a super synergistic team, you don't need to set guess shit, and that's great. That's fucking amazing. That's awesome. That's really all I have to say in terms of style. Basically, build teams for the person who's using them. If it's you, then it's you. If it's someone else, then ask them if they like it. You know, you don't need to super duper limit yourself in the team building because, oh my god, would I use this? Or, oh my god, would my teammate like this? You know, maybe make a little adjustment that you don't always make, because a lot of team building is changing things. That's something that I am super big on, is, you know, change stuff. Don't just throw 3 like set comp things together and call it a fucking day. You know, change stuff. Make things for you. And sometimes if you make things for you, that's like a tech that will maybe not be shown, or maybe it will be shown. Maybe, you know, if you EV your mon a little differently than everyone else, then you're going to be taking a certain hit that no one else has thought of taking. You know, for example, I like Zards that, you know, beat Megalopunny and Volcanion in ORAS. It's kind of hard to make it do both, but, you know, that's what thirds are for. You know, you don't need to beat, you know, Megalopunny and Volcanion if it's your second mon. So fucking EV for a Lopunny, or maybe EV for a Volcanion, then you still have a perfectly good set left over. Yeah, that's totally fine. I didn't see that a lot before I started doing it, really. People in Zards, or people in ORAS, kind of like faster Zards than me. But that's not really a big deal. Like, I don't need to be faster than everyone else's Zard with my Zard, because that's not what I value. I value having other ways to beat Zard than my own fucking Zard, right? I don't like set guessing. I don't like, you know, beating mons with my own mon that it's a Ditto. You know, I need to win the Ditto. That's not really how I build. I kind of like to have these like solid foundations. You know, find your own style. Though. If you're the type that builds for themselves and you're amazing at set guessing, I mean, a lot of people watching this video probably think they're good at set guessing, but they probably fucking suck at it. You know, if you are super confident in your ability to, you know, outplay a Manaphy, then you don't need to have a Manaphy counter. I personally am very confident in my ability to outplay Manaphy, even if it's like not that easy. If I have to get like 2 50-50s right now, I still think I will do that, because I think Manaphy users play like fucking pussies, right? That's that, really. build teams for yourself. You know, have a good work ethic when it comes to having the best mods imaginable. That's really all to say. Oh, one more thing. Make sure all your mons and their sets have purpose. Check out, you know, every move, every EV, every item, and see, hey, is this really the best I could do on this team to, you know, be as good as possible versus my opponent and the metagame? Be very thorough, and just look at like what your team's goal is and how well you executed it. Crucify's fucking muted his shit right now, so I'm gonna end the recording. Also, my last thing for part 1 is that I want to say that you should just know what stuff does in 1v1 and know how you know, they win games, because like a lot of the time, if you don't really know a certain meta, you will like kind of overlook a certain mon, and then you'll play a tournament game, and then you're like gonna lose to it, and you're like, wow, that's why people think that mon is good. Stuff like that. Know matchups, especially of top tier mons. You should probably know a lot of like how the first few mons in your team fare versus the meta, because once you like don't really know the meta and you keep building, it's kind of just strange to do, because you're more often than not gonna have to get lucky to get like a really good team that matches up well versus the meta and shit, because maybe you just lose to a Manaphy because, you know, you don't know like, oh yeah, it's actually really bulky and really strong at the same time, you know. Maybe that sort of thing just doesn't really compute. Maybe you just don't know the Manaphy calcs yet, because like in my head now, I totally like, I have like a rough Manaphy calc type of thing, like you know, a +3 hits approximately this hard, and I know like what stuff kind of lives in and what doesn't, but if you were like totally not familiar with that type of thing, you should ask yourself, hey, what don't I know about the meta, and then try to answer it yourself or ask other people and stuff. Okay, so to basically show a good example of this team building, I'm gonna walk through a team I made in 2019 in ORS that really had a grip on the metagame for, I'd probably say, 6 months. So yeah, so let's start off with the team's purpose. The team's purpose was to be used in World Cup semis versus my opponent Alice, who was on Central Europe with GGOPW, and so the reason I wanted to wear their LOP is because they were using teams like this. This is this one LOP, just straight up 3-0s. This Heatran Porygon Gardevoir one, and I was thinking about running Sock as well, because Sock does the same thing. But the thing with Sock is that I kind of used it a little bit at that time. I made this one team with like Sock, Tarak, Togekiss, that I knew GGOPW was aware of, and he was on that team. He was a captain, so I kind of wanted to get out of my box a bit, because I'd actually never used a Lopunny in ORAS and as an official tournament gear at this point. I just never used it. It's a mod now that I still think you kind of have to build around, but when you build around it, it's incredibly rewarding. But back then, this was not something that I was using a lot of. And FYI, this is 2019 ORAS, so this is actually usage stats of that. If you want to know what that looks like, you can pause as I scroll down. My boy Onyx. This is PL3 usage. I don't know why there was an Onyx used. I genuinely have no idea. But part of why I used Lopunny was because I'd never used it before, and I'm like, okay, I want to get out of the box, because if GGOPW was say building against me, he would think to himself, okay, well, he's never used a Lopunny, so I can maybe get 3-0 by Lopunny. And Lopunny's the type of mon that if you get 3-0 by it, you get 3-0 by it really hard. Like, there's nothing you can do, really, you know? It just fake outs you and then clicks, you know, strong stab move. So, that's why I wanted to build around it. It had some good matchups, had a lot of 2-1s, had some 3-0s, and I just had never used it, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try to really step out of my comfort zone here. And obviously, you know, you run this. I don't think it gets flail and oh, it does get flail. Okay, you can run flail, but that shit sucks. So I think it was originally like this. Gotta get a shiny, man. Gotta get a shiny. That was something that this Lopunny was a start. I had Encore on here because it's kind of a broken move in 1v1. If you can like find an excuse to put on Encore on something, you probably should. I mean, it's not really that good on low punny specifically in ORAS, but it's definitely decent. It hits Manaphy and it helps first Whimsicott because they're not gonna fucking taunt you, dude. You like fake out them and then you can Encore them into leech or whatever. I don't actually like know specifically how that like matchup like super works out, but that's just like something I was thinking about is Whimsicott. And yeah, I decided that a lot of Zards are not too bulky in this time. I honestly do not know what like everyone was running on Zard. People like were just running maybe like Jolly, you know, max. There wasn't really a consensus on like, okay, this is the best Zard X, you know, this is how you should EV your Zard. I'm talking about EVs. Like a lot can beat a lot of Zards, but not all. So I'm thinking, okay, Lopunny is a fast, strong beast. So I'm going to want something bulky. And I'm going to want something that beats like Zard every time. And also stuff like, you know, Scarf PZ, you know, stuff like Scarf Hoop on Bound was something I was like super aware of back then. You know, Sock, Mega Altaria was notable for Lopunny. They kind of started running a bit of like a lot. I don't know when, but they started running a ton of Spadef and not a lot of Fizdef. So Adamant Lop can roll Malt with like 72 defense or whatever that they run occasionally. And if they run 0 defense, like all Spadef or Speed or Special Deck or whatever, then you can roll them even harder. But I was Jolly on this one, and so I wanted that like tank thing, and I decided, okay, I was thinking about Diancie. I think I like Diancie. I think I used it in pools and I really liked it, so I decided to use I think Useless Crowd made it first, or maybe Rose did it, I don't know, but this was like an OG ORAS set that tries as hard as it can to beat Gyarados. And like now I know that there's like some 50-50s that occur, but even back then I don't think I was fully aware of it. I used this in test games, I was confident in it, but there's a bit of 50-50s that go into this. Okay, I think I'm trying to like eyeball these EVs. It should be something like this. I'm pretty sure. This is. I'm mostly doing this all off the top, and basically, yeah. So this is the fast, strong mon, and this is the slow Pokemon that can, you know, cover a lot of holes, like, you know, the Scarfers. Because when you're running like a fast mon, like, you know, Lopunny, you don't wanna be caught off guard, like in the battle by like random Scarfers. You want to be prepared ahead of time for, you know, the thing that beats like this archetype of mon. So yeah, this set beats Gyarados. It also beats other Lopunny. I think Mega Diancie was like very uncommon at this time. I don't really think anyone used it. It was like very low on the VR. It was like lower than regular Diancie on the VR, which is just funny to think now. And also before this, I was running a lot of Specs Diancie, like in PL3, I ran Specs Diancie. And I think I had this on a team, but I didn't click it in pools. Maybe I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure I brought this in pools and then didn't reveal it. So I was like confident that I could catch maybe a Gyarados off guard. And because Mega does exist and I was using Specs in PL3, I was thinking, okay, they're not gonna like taunt me. That's just not gonna happen, you know? So I was like, okay, this Lopunny, I'm gonna switch it to Ice Punch right now because I'll forget later. But basically, I was like in the 1v1 old gens room just playing room tours, and I used this team, and I learned that with Jolly, no Ice Punch, you actually like are rolled by Chomp, and people would send Chomp fearlessly into this team back then, if you know the third, because no one was using Mega on their Diancie. So yeah, a lot of regular Diancies back then. Like I like Specs and this set, which suck. They're not very good. Mega's like so much better, but you know, it just simply wasn't like labbed out that much that Mega's better. And beating Gyarados was cool for this team. So yeah, so we got the strong physical attacker, the mostly special attacker who is slow and tanky and has like some good resistances. So I am going to look I can either use usage or, like in this example, I'm using my VR I made with Crucify like a bit ago, just because it's a lot. It's like, you know, I'm just looking at it right now. You know, I don't have to scroll down like a lot to like see every mon. So stuff that was annoying for this core, and this core definitely is like not like amazing. Like you gotta have a really good third to make this shit work. But it did. This team did have an amazing third. So what jumps out is there's 2 steals. So I'm gonna just write out what I lost to because that's what I like to do. Meta grows. You gotta have pretty good matchup for some. And Scarf. I had Kieran Black. And then, I mean, this is new ORAS, but I'm still gonna use this to you know, see. You could maybe say something like protect Diancie, and then you get to like the most important things: Slowbro, Venusaur. Yeah. These were the main things I was like that made this list hard. So, what else does my third beat? It kind of beats Mew, like kinda. It beat. I wasn't struggling with T-Tar. Yeah. Also, there's like, or here's how I like. If I'm on it, like if I'm like lazy building, I'll do this. But here's what I'll do if I'm like tryharding. So I'll put like steals, and then this, and then I guess Genesect, and then something like counter edge steal. I don't think I was thinking about counter edge steal back then, but it is something that this core lost to. Because I was drawing a lot, yeah. So I hella lost to that shit. And then wait, why did I put protect Diancie? I have no idea. I think I was protect guard. I meant protect guard. Fast shit. And then protect guard would be like tanky shit, and then stall shit. Yeah, the categories sometimes help, sometimes don't. I think I used to do this a lot back then. And let me just see other stuff that let me look at the usage. That might help a lot. Kinda Whimsicott. My third did lose to Aqualim, spoiler alert. I don't know why I'm trying to like keep it hidden, but like there's a lot of new players that don't know my team. I was thinking about Odyssey, not really. And then I wasn't really worried about P2. I guess my core loses to like protect Magnezone. It's not a thing, but I guess I'll put that. So yeah, I couldn't really find anything else that I wanted because I built this team 2 years ago. So yeah, so I was thinking, okay. I mean, I'm just gonna leave this. This is not like useful. I'm thinking, okay, so Zard Y is pretty fucking good here, but the issue is there's Scarf Ironhead, Kieran Black, and I could have run I could have maybe ran a Zard Y to be Kieran Black, but I didn't want to like have to set guess versus Kieran Black. Instead I had a different shitty out. So there maybe was some. I'm trying to think why I didn't use Zard Y on this team. I genuinely. Okay, there's definitely other reasons why I didn't run Zard Y. I think it's because I just didn't use Zard Y back then. But now I would look at this and just be like, oh, Zard Y lol. Maybe it was fucking Magnezone. Maybe protect Magnezone, or like some random Magnezone was really on my mind. So I decided to run, or maybe it was this type of team. Maybe it's just this type of team. So I decided to scoop one of my old Specs Victini sets. I'm just gonna just put it here. This was my last. So I think I put Blue Flare because strong, Psychic for Slowbro, or no, for Venusaur, Grass Knot for Slowbro because Slowbro has to like Mega ID to not lose to Band. Do I have Calc? I don't think I have Calc. Here, one sec. Whoops. Okay. But yeah, so basically, here I'll show this. Teeny, Slowbro, Mega. I'll just put blank because they ran this, and so Bolt Strike would simply 2 a KO. I think it would 2 KO if you ran normal Slowbro. Yeah, it would do 1,000,000. It would do 1,000,000. So yeah, so you need to Mega, and as we saw before, didn't really beat Spit F Bro. You know, you just ID. It does less than 66 max, so you just have no win combos. Have like para, well, but well, if it's +2, yeah. So yeah, Slowbro wins. So they need to Mega, and then Mega actually increases Slowbro's weight. You gotta think about everything. You gotta think about, you know, Slowbro's weight when it Megas. So Grass Knot does a fuckload. I'm just gonna Victini. I think this is what I ran. Grass Knot, Choice, Specs. Yeah, it did a fuck ton. Oh, actually no, this is yeah, but basically 2 KO'd. And they did not Amnesia at this point. That was not a thought that crossed their mind. And I was fighting the Jokra at that time, now known as Alice. And I was thinking, okay, dude, they're not gonna call me out. They're not like a 1v1 tryhard. They're not gonna call me out on Specs Victini. That's just not something they're gonna be aware of or have like the vision to beat. And the last move was Focus Blast because of okay, so Kieran Black, doubles Choice Scarf. Yep, I'm playing doubles. And then Outrage. Okay, actually, Outrage just does not do anything. But I think I had something like this. So I had 100 HP, maybe like 104. I think it was like this. And okay, if I'm smart, this should go up to like 274 or something. Okay, that's what. Okay, maybe I think it was like 274, and then just like either this. I think it might have just been exactly this, honestly, or maybe like something like this, or something like. I don't know if I was EVing for Mawile Sucker Punch. I don't know if that was like a thing that crossed my mind. Okay, I'm just gonna go to the import. Like I have the import. Like this is my team. Oh, it's 200. Okay, this thing I thought it would be faster than like 274, but it is not. Yeah, this is a set. I'm just gonna. Yeah, it should be pretty EV'd for maybe like Adamant can like semi roll you like 6.3. I mean, I can just calc that right the fuck now. So. Victini. Whoops. And what was I calculating against? Mawile, Mega. Okay, yeah, you're perfectly EV'd for that. So there you go. This was back when the Adamant Maw was like semi-common. I think most people at this point were transitioning to Spidef, but Adamant was definitely a thing in the meta. So yeah, it was fucking this. I don't know why I put second before Blue Flare. That's some unviable move order. Let me fix that right now. But yeah, I think so. Basically, this Specs Victini shit was like perfect for this because if I had a Zard and like it could maybe obviously be Y, and maybe I was just bugging about Magnezone hard. I don't know, but this is a team. I think I just didn't use Zard Y at the time, so now I'm kind of realizing Zard Y could work. But maybe it was because I was like expecting like this type of team, and their thought process would be, okay, I need to not lose to Lop, because in theory, like this team looks like it's through by Slowbro, so they're gonna go Slowbro because they don't want to lose to Lop. Because if I'm like, okay, I lose to Slowbro, I'm gonna click Lop just to catch the other two. They're gonna probably click Slowbro. That was my mentality, I believe. I really wanted to lure Slowbro in hard with the set, and so yeah, this was the team that ended up. Okay, I'm just gonna look at the. Let me see how close I was on the Dynasty EVs. I don't know why I'm putting so much importance on this. Wait, what did I do wrong? Oh, okay, whatever. This is the final team I believe, yeah. Okay, this is the final team. This has to be Smeargle, by the way, but that's like irrelevant as fuck. Who clicks Smeargle with this? Anyways, so let's look at like why am I using this mod? Why am I using Lopunny? As I mentioned earlier, counter team, and also mod I didn't use. Dancy is like the slow, tanky, mixed attacker, and then I have the semi-tanky. Focus is for Kieran Black. I don't know if I put that earlier, but Scarf Kieran Black with Iron Head fucks his shit up. And so I just wanted Focus Blast to like solidify that matchup. They didn't ran Haban at this point, obviously. So yeah, this is the like slow tanky mon that like handles the anti-offense, like you know the Scarf Hoop Unbound, the Scarf PZs. I don't know why Scarf Hoop Unbound. I'm like talking about that. It's like it's a huge ass deal. It's not really that good. I mean, it was common. I use it a lot, so I guess it was just on my mind. And then this is the like slow or not slow, like mid-speed, mid-bulk, surprise special attacker, anti-meta. So this team was, if you really think about it, look at these mons. Like Ooga Boogamon, okay, Ooga Boogamon, anti-meta Ooga Boogamon, and then like tanky semi Ooga Boogamon. You know, this team has like a rock solid like archetypal, physical, special, mixed, fast, semi-fast, slow type of shit. Like this team has so much synergy, and there are some weaknesses. Like now I know, I feel like Amnesia Mew should win if they Amnesia on you, but also this time, okay, actually they would not be afraid of Meg. I don't know why I'm saying that. They'd be afraid of Band, and Band just rapes Mew. Like it's just not even close. Slowbro, if they regular grass on you. Scarf D-Knight with Iron Head, which nobody used. Absolutely nobody used that shit in ORS at that point. Volcano is annoying, but Band like beats that like I think like 78% of the time. Haxorus was a weakness, but nobody used that. And as I list out my weaknesses, I read them out beforehand. They're just not something that were either in the meta or something that people would confidently pick versus this team. Like this team was just like mixed defense Togekiss, but you know these two look like they beat Togekiss, so you know why is that thing? And then I was oh wait, actually what happened? T-Punch. I was super Ice Punch. What? Okay, whatever. I was Ice Punch for Chomp, yeah. And also I'm Jolly. What am I doing, bro? I imported this like stupidly, I guess. Oh, I'm looking at like a variation, yeah, with a different lob. But yeah, so this team has so many inherent synergies. It is easy to use, like these two mons. This was super anti-meta, and this is like pretty anti-meta. And then once people started doing this, it became very anti-meta. And then you know, this was just a solid backbone for the team. And you know, it just has like so many like synergistic things inside it. Like these two are kind of a weird core, so you know you need to have a good third, but luckily this team does have a good third, so it's totally fine. And the weaknesses either don't look like weaknesses, or like they don't look like 3-0 specifically, or they don't look like or they just weren't a thing in like 2019 ORAS, you know. Yeah, so this team had a very anti-meta, like this was like the best ORAS team for, I'd say, probably between mid World Cup 3 and like before PL4. Everyone just like, if you were playing ORAS, like you fought this team. Like this is so like common of a team to fight. Yeah, and it has so many like synergistic things, as I said earlier. Like this here, I'm gonna show you something that Elo Bandit used to use on the 1v1 ladder. It's like he had a bunch of variations of this, but it's called like 1v1 hyper offense, and he has like there's like basically this team like has to bend over backwards to not like have garbage matchups versus S-rank mons like Zard X, Gara, PZ. Its PZ check was like Shadow Sneak, Greninja, which is just dumb. It kind of worked back then, but like this is like a cool ladder team, I guess. Like, yeah, it's just Ooga Booga, you hit hard. But this is like really Like, no offense, Bandit, but this is simply a better team. Like, at the time at least. Now, I mean, people know the stats, but you can switch out the stats. But yeah, basically, this is a guide of like why you choose the things you do. Like, you know, you shouldn't just throw 2 mons together and be like, oh, I lose to this stuff, and then throw a third. You should like be asking yourself, like, why am I, like, what, like, very specific things does this mon provide? And you could probably have, you know, a different fat mon and a different fire type, and then, you know, it'd be fine. But this team had definitely like some anti-meta and easy to use factors to it that made it like everyone was using this team in late 2019. So yeah, that was a run through of my low pun Victini team.